Hello, and thank you for joining me once again. I am reading The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. Pick the book up, it is a great book. Thank you for taking the time to listen along as I read because I really do feel like this book has um, important information in it. So, those of you who are not readers, then you can listen to what the information has to say. It's a lot of spiritual teachings, and in the back of the book, it has meditation and energy techniques. So, once again, thank you. We are starting off on chapter 5 today. All right, on page 47. So, sit back and enjoy. And once again, thank you. Chapter 5 The Religion of Atlantis. Religion for religion's sake. As I said earlier, part of our training at the monastery was to learn about the various cultures and religions of the world. So many of my earliest courses as a novice monks were about religions. At the time, as typical with my young ego, I thought I already knew all there was to know about the subject. But there was really far more to it than I thought. The following chapter is a recollection of a course given by Elder Noah regarding Atlantean and later teachings about religion. There are a variety of good reasons that can't be behind the founding of a religion. Some good and some are bad. Thus both good and bad religions have been created. There are religions that started as a means of worship, some to help people improve themselves spiritually or otherwise. Others have specifically created just to control or have power over the people. But even many religions that started with good intentions degenerated over time into self-serving power structures whose main function was to control people and make money. How do they control people other than by peer pressure or trying to convince someone about something with a sermon? They vary in their methods and functions. Most offer their members personal salvation through following their religion's tenets, the beliefs, rituals, and dogma. And thus they insinuate you will not find God or salvation if you don't follow their particular religion. Most also aim to fulfill an emotional or psychological need in people's heart and minds. They generally each have their own dogma, answers to spiritual questions about God, who we are, and the rules that we should live by. Some religions control by using people's insecurities and have even been formed based on the insecurity of an ignorant society. Some were based on fear. There is the fear of hell, religion as fire insurance. There is the fear of God, which, what exactly do you mean? I said I was insensitively interrupting him before he was about to explain anyway. I was just getting to that. It is religion that basically comes from the ideal of needing to worship and serve a God or some kind of powerful supreme being because you actually need to fear him if you don't. Because he is all powerful and has negative emotional attributes, commitments, atrocities when angry or jealous, and allows great suffering and disasters when he could easily stop them. So Noah, what you are saying is worshiping that kind of God is not much different than being respectful to or paying homage to and to taxes to an evil king or warlord of a realm. Because if you don't, he may come burn your hut or your fields and kill you or your family, rape your wife, etc. That's an interesting, insightful analogy. Yes, in fact, that's precisely what many religions did and how they used the concept of God. But as opposed to being just a king or a warlord, people were told it was an all powerful being, like a supernatural powered evil alien from outer space, bent on taking over and controlling all the people of this earth. And of course, the next step in such a religion is dealing with the abusive power of its leaders. The religion's leaders, being self-appointed representatives of such a god, would even torture and burn people alive for not believing or behaving precisely as they dictated, or precisely as the God they represented dictated that they live. Millions of people have been murdered and tortured as a result of this, like the Inquisition. Let's just say for now that people throughout time and various religions have used their particular God or even their particular name for their God as an excuse to control, torture, and murder. That's one reason we prefer to call God the universal spirit rather than anything that personalizes or segregates the concept. But here, but there have been legitimate or sincere reasons and beginnings for religions too. Some have been formed based on faith or the moral ideas of religion's founders. Some have been based on visions or insights of a great spiritual teacher. Unfortunately, when the founding visionary dies, usually dogma and the religion take over. Others provide a more direct means for personal salvation within the framework of dogma. How and why was the religion of the children of the law of one started? A religion that is not a religion. Noah paused and stroked his beard for a moment. While the children of the law of one is a spiritual way and also a monastic order, monastic order, I suppose you could say it is somewhat like a religion, but it is not a religion in a couple of very important ways. To start with, none of the above reasons were behind the founding of the children, nor do they play a part in what they teach. There is no control, not even an attempt to influence, only to educate and reflect the truth. To understand why the children of the law of one was created and what their foundations are, we need to go back to the beginnings of human life on earth. Oh, it sounded like we were going to get into something more interesting stuff. Please go on, I said. I will, just give me a moment. More beard stroke and meditation ensued as he prepared himself to tell the story. The Fall. This book devotes an entire chapter to the history of the children of the Law of One, from its genesis prior to Atlantis to present, directly translated from the ancient texts and my accounts of recent developments. But in the following segment, Noah just briefly describes the specific aspects of that history which led to the creation of the children. You've heard Darwin, you've heard Genesis. Now, you are about to hear another theory. The first one that made sense to me. And according to the Atlantean teachings, Genesis is actually a simplified, loose allegory based on this. The historical records start with the premise that there is one great being, God, universal spirit, that is all things, including the universe itself. It divides, multiplies within itself to create us. Thus, our history begins with all of us humans essentially part of and one with God. The records describe us as being spiritual or angelic beings free to roam, create, and enjoy the universe. The first teachings go on to say that our beginnings on earth came in two steps: the first wave and second wave of human and semi-human materialization into physical bodies on earth. At the time, we had the ability to instantly alter our vibration and instantly create anything we desired with a mere thought. It was in this way that we thought ourselves into matter, into material existence on earth, which began our fall from the angelic state and oneness with God. You have probably heard of mythological beings such as Minotaur, Centaur, and mermaids, etc. The Minotaur had a bull's head and a human body. The Centaur, a human head and torso with a horse's body. You may also have seen pictures of Egyptian gods with animal heads and human bodies, or animal bodies with human heads, like the Sphinx. In the Pacific regions, ancient drawings and carvings of bird-headed humans can be found on both sides of the ocean. Why do you think so much of this exists? Many legends and myths have found foundation in facts, and this is no exception. The ancient teachings from Atlantis reveal that such creatures did indeed exist, and that their origins were not what you might expect. They were the falling angelic beings from the first wave of materialization on earth. Fallen angels? You mean like Lucifer? Well, yes and no. You have a misconception of sorts. That is a personalized concept from the allegory. The first wave of materialization was a terrible mistake. Author's note. This will be explained in greater detail in the history chapter. The first wave beings materialized as partly human, partly animal creatures. This is why in the story of Lucifer or other various creatures that were called devils or demons or whatever, they appeared as horns, cloven-hoofed creatures with tails. The fact is, they were part goat. This is why goats have become associated with the devil also. But evil is an entirely different matter. Think not that evil does not exist, but true evil disguises itself and points the finger at the innocent. So Lucifer was not evil? Not initially. The stories you have heard have become terribly mixed up. Even the Bible originally paints him as a great angel, but there is no rebellion or defiance against the will of God until after this fall, not prior to the fall, as often is depicted. It was just a mistake at first. Try telling one person in a meeting hall a story and ask him to repeat it quietly to the next, and the next person to the next, until it comes back to you. By the time you hear the original story, it will not even be recognizable. That is why our teaching methods are so stringent. We must keep the truth straight and consistent. And this has been assured by our forebears. Getting back to the primary teachings today, there were more fallen angels than Lucifer, and they took many different part animal forms. For ease of description, we call the part human part animal beings that fell into physical vibration or matter during the first wave of materialization? Humanimals. As soon as the first wave beings materialized into their humanimal bodies, they suffered a great fall in vibration from their previous spiritual angelic state of existence. They instantly experienced a near total loss of consciousness, awareness, and intelligence. In less than the twinkling of an eye, the consciousness that just moments before had encompassed the entire universe and experienced oneness with the universal spirit God was virtually gone. The new limited consciousness of these pitiful creatures trapped them on the physical plane of the earth, where they had to live in ignorance with their animal-like intelligence and awareness. They were suddenly isolated from universal God consciousness and trapped in the lonely anguish of separate consciousness. This separate consciousness gave birth to a sort of separate free will, which was ignorantly used selfishly rather than in harmony with the will of God. Ultimately, they would also be trapped in slavery. Evil is spawned by selfishness, but later, even greater degrees of evil came about, which we will discuss much later. Yet all selfishness and evil has since mistakenly been blamed on these poor, unfortunate first waver humanimals. To be sure, some had horns and tails and cloven hoofs, but they have been used as scapegoats and diversions in order for others, including regular humans, to avoid taking personal responsibility for their real evil, the real devil, which is the selfishness living inside of each human who maintains separate consciousness from the oneness of God. Other novice monks in the class, including me, immediately responded with a flurry of questions. What do you mean? How can this be? How did it happen? Slow down, Noah said. One question at a time, please. All will be answered in time. Remember, we were spirits only, very fine, high frequency vibrational beings with no experience in the physical realm. These humanimals came upon their terrible fate because of rapid, uncontrolled slowing down of their vibrational frequencies for purpose of materialization of their spiritual selves into the material plane of the earth. It occurred in a way that cut them off from their normal consciousness, like changing the dials on a radio to an area of radio frequency that had nothing to receive. Their internal radio of consciousness was no longer in tuned to God. It was a materialization that went too far, too deep into the dense, slow vibrations of the physical plane. When the finer frequencies were cut off, they were left cut off from God and the rest of spiritual creation, and thus consciousness of the oneness of the universe, the consciousness of God, the universal spirit. This left them with only a separate self-consciousness that lost touch with oneness consciousness or universal consciousness. Then why aren't all of us still lost and out of touch with God? A couple of reasons. Some of us did not make the fall. Those who did fall were still in their angelic state and watched those who didn't fall were still in their angelic state and watched all of this happen to the first wavers. Our Grand Master, author's note, later known as Jesus in his last life on earth, organized and led a rescue mission. With their great love and compassion, many of the other angelic beings who had not fallen decided to help the trapped first wavers, even at great risk of the same fate. They became what we called the second wavers. The second wavers knew they could only help the first wavers if they too materialized in forms that would allow them to work on the lost souls, the humanimal creatures. In their own physical form and dimension. And the Grand Master and various angelic volunteers knew that in order to do that, it would require lowering their own vibrations towards that of the physical plane and subsequently lowering their consciousness to some extent. They knew this was dangerous, and they had to be very careful how they did this, and be careful about how deeply they went into physical matter, or they too would become trapped in limited consciousness just as the humanimals were. Thus, the ancient Atlantean teachings described how this second wave became the first consciously controlled thought projection or materialization of modern human life on Earth. Or at least they eventually became modern humans as they gradually solidified into the material plane from their spiritual angelic state. The ape-like early human form was actually just eventually chosen by second wavers as the preferred type of physical vehicle to model themselves after, because it allowed for the greatest control and manipulation in the physical plane that would require to help the first wavers. That is why scientists cannot find the missing link, because there simply is none. Because while evolutionary change certainly does exist, our present existence on Earth did not involve evolving for millions of years from apes. Again, if the above theory of creation that is offered by the ancient Atlantean teachings is disagreeable to you, no biggie. It's okay. That's okay. There are all kinds of theories of creation that people are very intense and pushy about. We aren't. Scientists are supposed to stay objective and stick to proven facts. And if they can't present absolutely proven facts, they are supposed to present their ideas as theories and only as theories. Yet, many alleged scientists have sneakily insinuated and taught the theory of evolution of humans from apes as facts, even when they have a huge gap, a huge missing link in their theory. They have not found a direct ancestral lineage of modern man that connects the whole evolution of apes and caveman types, of semi-apes and semi-humans. And on the flip side of the evolutionary theory, many religions have followers and thus money and power at stake. Unlike both of these categories, we have nothing at stake, nothing to prove, nothing to lose or gain, since we don't make money or get power from the teachings we present. While we have personally viewed it as a historical written record, you are welcome to take them or leave them. We really, really don't care if you believe the concept of histories or creation presented in this book or not. If it rings a bell of truth for you, fine. If it doesn't, that's okay too. We obviously can't prove ancient history, nor do we feel it is important. It isn't important. We really, truly don't care about any of those intellectual ideas, theories, or concepts. We do care about the reality of human life and suffering now. The things that are really impactful, the things that really impact everyone's lives on earth. So, what we want and what we really care about is simply for everyone to be kind, caring, compassionate, and harmless. Is it really too much to ask, even if you believe you are descendant from an ape? Is it really too much to ask if you believe God created you out of Adam's rib? Who cares? We don't think it's too much to ask, regardless of what you believe, don't believe, or have faith in, or don't have faith in. The same goes for everything else you read in this book. Who cares? Be nice. Let's all be real, caring friends and family. The creation of the children of the law of one. Before Noah could catch his breath, I began my eager questioning again. So, the second wave of materialization began as a rescue operation of sorts to save the humanimal beings who fell in the first wave? Please tell me more about who organized this and how could they do anything about it? Who we will discuss later. Please just let me finish relating this part of the teaching. In order to accomplish this rescue, as you call it, two things had to be done. One, methods had to be devised that would help the humanimals regain their spiritual consciousness and awareness of oneness with the universal spirit. And two, methods had to be devised for the second wavers to maintain their spiritual consciousness and awareness of oneness with the universal spirit. To both these ends, second waves being founded the spiritual path of the children of the law of one and created the methods and teachings that are still in use and valid today. Thus, the spiritual order of the children of the law of one was founded with a very specific and unique purpose. And while this order included aspects of what would later become numerous religions of the children of the law of one, was unlike any other religion that would ever appear on earth, and remain so. It was not created to fill a need in people's hearts or minds, nor to strike fear in their hearts, nor to worship anyone or anything, nor to answer the spiritual questions that arose in the spiritually ignorant masses, nor to control those masses. It was created before all those issues even existed. So the children are not really a religion in a sense. No. By many modern definitions, it could be considered such, but again, the whole point of the children's materialization was to rescue their trapped kin by returning the first wavers to their angelic state of existence and awareness, universal consciousness. Thus, the whole part, thus the whole point of the children's spiritual path was to be able to enter the material plane so they could help the first wavers while maintaining their own spiritual consciousness and angelic state, so they wouldn't get trapped also. If I may continue, falling again. As the second wave rescue mission gradually descended into materiality and human form, some of them, lured by selfish desires, turned away from the children's spiritual path. They then lost spiritual awareness and separated from oneness with God. Ultimately, this division created two religious or philosophical groups in Atlantis with very different purposes and politics. The sons of Belial and the children of the Law of One. The sons of Belial mimicked the children in many ways, even in the sense of being spiritual or religious. But the religious practices were mockeries of true spirituality, phony, empty, and self-serving. They would even use prayer and visualization to attain whatever they wanted. And they turned a blind eye to what repercussions of getting what they wanted would have on others. Some popular present-day religions are offsprings of the Belialian religion. And then there are the secret societies that still practice their original ways. In Atlantis, the most significant contention between the children and the Belialians was over what to do with the humanimals. The humanimals were easily controlled by the powers of the second waver's mind, and they could be made to do anything through visualization. Since the Belialians had turned away from their awareness of oneness with God in favor of selfishness, they wanted to use the humanimals as pet slaves. The children, however, still wanted to help rescue the humanimals to their higher state of consciousness. Thus, the children also became activists, and their goal as a group movement was still to free their trapped kin. But now they also had to contend with the other second wavers who had gone bad. So Noah, did the children win over the Belialians? There aren't any humanimals walking the earth anymore, right? Were they all killed or rescued? I'll answer that in a moment, but first let me say that even the best of the children of the Law of One eventually succumbed to some degree to the separation from the universal spirit. But that is another story, which involves the allegory of Adam and Eve. Now, to answer your question, while part of the children's goal was eventually achieved, the humanimals were freed from their animal entanglement after the destruction of Atlantis, freedom from darkness and slavery had not been fully accomplished. The battle continues. As far as the first wavers go, reincarnated humanimals still walk the earth in normal human bodies. You have seen them. If you are observant, you can see subtle animal traits, mannerisms, or facial appearances on many of the people of the world. But humanimal or not, the age-old struggle between the children and the Belialians, the struggle of freedom against slavery, still continues. These days, slavery can be in many forms: traditional, economic, socio-political, oppression, imprisonment, and mental programming. The world is basically populated by 5 groups: the children, Balalians, reincarnated lost souls from lost soul first and second wavers, and the enlightened. Most from both the first and second wavers are still separate in consciousness from the universal spirit. That makes them easy prey for the Balalians, and they either become their pawns in one way or another, or their slaves in one way or another. Author's note: in previous editions of this book, the only description of Balalians was that of the old teachings. This left many people confused about who and what they were and how they looked in modern times. Balalians are not some kind of genetic creatures who have physically lived and survived for thousands of years. Like all of us, they have continued to reincarnate and live in modern human bodies. But they are so evil, those of us who are sensitive to it can sense or feel that. This can sometimes even be physically or intuitively seen as being reptilian-like, or, as the old teachings call it, lizard-like. But whether you see or sense this yourself, you can know them by their agenda. Lifetime after lifetime, they maintain their maniacal drive for power and agenda for slavery and domination. Many of them are the people who run the world. The upper echelon are the real power people pulling the strings behind the scenes. Like initiate monks of the children, the higher level Balalians are totally conscious and aware of who they are and what they are doing. The middle and lower echelon are sometimes in the forefront or in the public eye, functioning as political, military, or business leaders who are apparently not being told what to do, yet they really are. Of course, some leaders are just pawns and not consciously aware of who they serve and wouldn't care anyway. Balalians are usually born rich and powerful families who are already of the Balalian heritage, and their families train them and continue to pass on their traditions. They go to the best schools and join the right and special fraternities and sororities. They are trained in the ways of using visualization and ritual to practice their dark magic. They always want more money and power. They want to maintain economic slavery and child labor slavery in the world, and even worse. They want a state of total monitoring and control of all the people, and they have been making great strides in this. They will use physical force to dominate and control if necessary. But mental programming through education, media, peer pressure, or other means has been extremely successful, and parents continuing to pass their own programming on to their children also. Examine world history, and you see these struggles continuing through time. Entire groups of evil oppressors trying to enslave. We have continued to fight them, and they continue to fight us. Just as many of the scientific advances have come from the reincarnated Atlantean scientists, so too have those with thirst for power and control at any cost come from reincarnated Balalians. They continue to develop more sophisticated ways to keep people under their control. So how do you identify them? Again, you can feel it, and sometimes see it when you look into their eyes. But anyone whose agenda is control of others is either Balalian or one of their pawns. They care only about themselves and would be willing to harm anyone and even everyone on the planet if it helps them get more power. And they can do this all with a big smile and warm handshake, which many people buy into as being a nice person. Ask yourself if this could be true and feel the response from your inner voice. Noah continues. So our religion and work continues on. And now, because of the time and situation he pointed at me, will soon be publicly revealing the teachers of the children and heralding the coming spiritual changes. Remember, because of the unique nature and purity of the Atlantean children's spiritual way, it is as valuable today as it was then. Sorry, lost my place. Remember, because of the unique nature and purity of the Atlantean children's spiritual way, it is as valuable today as it was then. Their teachings and methods can help anyone return to the universal spirit, achieve enlightenment, and live in harmony with universal law and universal will. Thank you, Noah. It was my honor to help you. And with that, he bowed and kissed my hand with the feeling of love and respect that one might only expect to see offered to his teacher or head of the order. It was rather shocking to me because I felt I wasn't worthy of it, didn't deserve it, and that it wasn't appropriate for someone of my humble station. But he was honoring who I was inside, which at the time I didn't really see in myself, even though my ego thought it did. Nevertheless, it was there, just waiting to manifest. Author's note. Now, as I deal with my students and others, I also see who they really are inside, their potential, and support that. We relate to that as well as their present level of consciousness. To re-separate self is our constant function and duty. Then Noah put his hands together and made a gesture of spiritual respect to the other novice monks in the chamber and crawled off through the little door. The next day, Noah discussed more crossing cultures. The next day, Noah discussed more about different cultures and the religions or spiritual traditions of various cultures. Some spiritual traditions are so rooted in the culture they are from that people from foreign countries, cultures or lands find them difficult to adapt to. Sometimes there are even language barriers and cultural customs that have become part of religion. For instance, some paths require learning or chanting in Japanese or East Indian languages rather than translations for those languages. Many require performing or participating in rituals that are unique to foreign cultures, even though they have evolved specifically because of those cultures. While some paths have legitimate reasons for such things, most do not. And their requirements are limiting and often nothing more than dogma and cultural bias. Boy, I can relate to that, Noah. A year or so ago, I entered a Zen monastery in the U.S. for about 6 months, and they did everything in Japanese. and in Japanese style, and wouldn't explain to me what the translations of the Japanese chants were. Even still, I liked a great deal of it, and I definitely got something out of it, but it wasn't ultimately my right path. No, it was a very good path, but clearly this is yours. If for no other reason than to teach me patience. What? I was just joking, younger brother. You had a good point. It's just that you are here for me to learn some things, just as I am here for you to learn some. But you are ultimately here for the world more than I. But let me get on with what I was saying. Unlike other traditions and religions, our spiritual philosophical teachings lack any emphasis on religion dogma and have no cultural embedding. The teachers are from every part of the world, and the universality of the teachings and methods easily adapt to those individuals from any culture who have an open mind and are truly spiritually inclined. Thus, it is a path that is readily accessible and useful to people from any land, if they wish to take advantage of it. To someone like me, who had previously studied many religions and cultures, the teachings crossed over seemingly opposing religious boundaries and unifying wisdom. They were also complete, filling in all the blanks left by my previous studies. And tying in the aspects of truth I had found in other paths into one comprehensive whole. A natural spiritual path based on universal laws. My next course involved how the Atlantean teachings came about and what they were based on. It was given by the elder monk Zarathustra. I hope I said that right. I'd heard on the grapevine that he had long ago originally come from Germany. He was quite well studied and intellectual from what I'd seen of him so far. I liked him. And he even let me be involved in some very sophisticated vibrational experiments he was conducting, which gave me the foundation for my later vibrational studies and developments. He had a great scientific insight into such matters and was perfect for teaching this course. The beliefs and teachings that the children of the Law of One had and have were not formed based on faith. Most of the basis of them come from Atlantis, and thus to us. Our knowledge, philosophies, and practices are simply gleaned from the scientific facts and universal laws that govern all things in the universe, including the use of mind and energy. They are merely the result of observations of the universal forces that are involved in the practical applications of our spiritual and physical existence. Thus, even today, understanding the substance of even the ancient beliefs requires no faith, but rather a certain quality of intuitive logic. In fact, the path urges us not to take the teachings on faith, but to experience God and higher consciousness directly. That way, we can really know rather than just taking something on faith and hoping really bad that it's true. There is no more powerful way to change your life in a real and lasting way than to directly experience universal consciousness and thus experience and know oneness with universal spirit, God. The teachings both give us methods to expand our awareness and directly experience God and universal consciousness while also explaining to us the effects of universal laws in simple terms, even if the law itself is difficult to understand. Ah, that statement was difficult to understand. Novice Vincent said. Okay, for instance, you may not understand the complex laws of gravity that physicists grapple with, but you can understand how Newton's observation of an apple falling from a tree led him to scientific concept of what goes up must come down, right? Yes. More simply, still, your own experience with the law of gravity has taught you about the effects it has on your life. For instance, you wouldn't ignore the law of gravity and walk off a 30th floor balcony. Yet, how many people ignore even more important universal laws because they don't really understand their effects factually? So the ancient Atlantean teachings offer us a way to understand the effects of universal laws on our lives and thus a way to benefit from them. Yes, I understand you now, but I want to learn more about spirituality, not physics. True spirituality is tied to universal law, though. And if you want to consider that just plain physics is fine, but this scientific approach doesn't mean that the path of the children is a cold and clinical one. Far from it. Nowhere else will you find more emphasis on compassion and love. Instead, the scientific basis in the teachings make the ways of beliefs of the children of the law of one more simple and unique. As opposed to other religious orders, it is a natural religion and more appropriately, a natural spiritual path. It is natural because it is based on nature, not just the nature of this planet, but the nature of the universe. It was founded on an understanding of the way of the universe functions and endeavors to apply the laws and flows that govern it to human condition. The ways of the children are thus developed to ensure that we are in our proper place in the grand scheme of things. Rather than encouraging blind faith in an unknown God and a dogma, it encourages knowing and experiencing the universal spirit yourself and becoming one with it. By these very virtues, it is not as much as religion as it is a way of being one with all of creation and the Creator both. Nor is it just physics by any means. This is not your garden variety religion. And it has a beautiful simplicity to it. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there and finish the rest of chapter 5. No, I think I'm going to go on. Science magic. One morning, I decided to explore a bit of the Central Pyramid just to check it out. Just to check out some of the incredible things. I was walking up one of the chamber halls there when all of a sudden I saw a strange moving light coming from a small side tunnel. Before I could even look into it, Zenuru came crawling out of it. He was one of the initiates of the monastery, an adept monk, who was the personal teacher of many of the elder and novice monks who worked with the monastery's energy systems. He was holding a lantern flashlight, sort of a lantern flashlight, which explained the strange light. From day one, I had heard the phrase science magic used around the monastery. Sometimes it was referring to the monastery's technology, but sometimes it was regarding the creation of our personal lives. But when the term was used in reference to the monastery's technology, it was often used in the same breath as the name of the adept Zenuru. I had also come across references to science magic in the ancient texts in the library, but it had not been explained to me in any of my courses yet. So I decided to ask him about it while I had a chance. I didn't know if he would have the time or inclination to speak to a novice monk like me, but it was worth a shot. Zenuru, if you have a moment, could I speak with you? A moment. A moment. I suppose I do. Yes. No. It's gone now. Sorry. But yes, I'll speak with you anyway. Can you tell me about this science magic I keep hearing about? No problem. It has been said that all the teachings of the children of the Law of One are based within science magic. Have you heard that? Yes, I think so. You think so? Very well. Well, they are all based on it. Let me explain the history of that. To our ancestors, what many considered the mysteries of life were not confusing or complex, but simply a matter of applying their understanding of universal laws. I just had a course about that. Good. Then you'll save me some time. Our Atlantean ancestors easily manipulated vibration using thought within the framework of scientific facts. God and spirituality were not vague concepts. The universal spirit was not unknown to them or some being that was out there somewhere. Excuse me. And magic and miracles were not just something that existed in fairy tales and religious parables from days gone by. They were all the scientific workings of spiritual forces on physical matter. Spiritually, as well as materially and physical life, were all simply based on scientific facts of universal law. For instance, they understood that psychic phenomenon, electricity, magnetism, gravity, light, sound, space, time, and such were all related and aspects of the same thing, and all followed universal law. The barbarian cultures that lived around us or called it into contact with our ancestors couldn't understand these things. So they just lumped it all together as magic. Some mysterious something that could only be created and wielded by gods, devils, or witch doctors with strange powers and rituals. But what gives anything the appearance of magic, if not deceptive illusions or tricks? What is real magic other than creating or altering energy and matter, which is comprised of energy? So, in a very real sense, much of what we do is magic, but it is based in science, not superstition. Thus, science magic is inheritance in the children of the law of one's entire approach to life and religion. Visualizations, for instance, works like magic. You see it happening and it happens. Visualization is used successfully in everything from Zen archery to healing. And all such things have that appearance of working like magic. Here, let me give you a little demonstration. He had me stand behind him and lift him up by the waist. It was easy. He asked, "You should be able to do that again." "Yes." "Of course," I said. "Then do so." I tried. It was like he was holding heavy weights or glued to the ground. I managed to budge him, but it took all my effort and strength, whereas it was easy just a moment ago. How'd you do that? Simple visualization and energy. One aspect of science magic. You will learn it in time, and if I had wanted to really put my mind to it, you wouldn't have been able to lift me at all. That's incredible. That's nothing. But while our ancestors achieved wondrous things with their science magical tools, it is not any more mysterious to us than defecating is to the uninitiated. To us, this use of the mind to create physical realities is just simple fact of universal law, science, and a very fundamental one. This also applies to everything else in the children's early days on Earth, such as their use of pyramids to provide power to vehicles and buildings without any visible connection. All their understanding of God, spirituality, and the matters of day-to-day life are based in this knowing, and that real magic is science and real science is magic. This lamp I am holding, for instance, it has no batteries like they use in the outside world, yet it is powerful. It is powered by what? Something you can't see and you don't yet understand. Is it magic? I guess so. Is it science? I guess so. Which reminds me, I have some repairs I'm in the middle of. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for your time and teaching, Zenaru. Think nothing of it. You're quite welcome. You must have more tasks, and I know you want to know more about how we are using some of the ancient technology to power things here. You'll be able to learn them easily if you wish. You have great vision and insight that few have, and I welcome discourse with you. Watch it. You'll get my ego out of hand with comments like that. I wouldn't worry about that. Zayn will assure the last of your ego is stomped to death. He talked about you a great deal. I cringed inside. Oh, great. That's something to really look forward to. In truth, it is. You will be far wiser, more intelligent, find peace, and your place as a caring instrument of the One, once all is said and done. I replied, that sounds better than being stomped to death. He laughed. Same difference, you'll learn. Then headed on up the shaft. The reality, practicality, and day-to-day practice of science magic by the children give their teachings a substance that is rare in other paths. So while some of the spiritual teachings you will read about here may sound similar to other spiritual teachings, keep in mind that it's possible that they are based on the very different framework on a very different framework of understanding life and living. A very real and practical framework, not an airy-fairy idea. And that framework can make a big difference. So, if you read something that seems like just a religious or spiritual concept, keep in mind that if you understood as a whole within the entire framework of the teachings, they are also just a fact of science magic. And in the right hands, or right minds in this case, they are just indispensable keys of understanding life, co-creating your world, and living in harmony with the universe. Complex ideas with a simple message. Because the children's path is so strongly based in universal law and what might be called realities of the universe, many of the teachings are by their very nature quite intellectual and require concentration and sometimes rereading sentences in order to grasp them. I apologize for this, but it can't be helped. However, even though there is much intellectual knowledge presented in practice, it is all balanced with feeling. For the very essence of this path is very clear and very simple. Unselfish love. Everyone can understand the healing and good that comes from kindness, compassion, caring, giving, harmlessness. Those are the virtues of unselfish love, the things that really matter. And they are also the ultimate keys of returning to and being in harmony with universal spirit and what the children of the Law of One are all about. For me, discovering the ancient teachings filled in many holes in my understanding. I grew more excited every day as I learned more, grew more, and pieces fell into place. When I found this path, I felt like a man dying of thirst discovering oasis in the desert. To paraphrase a spiritual concept from Stranger in a Strange Land, as I was given water, I now offer water to you. I now offer you water. May you drink deep. Coming up against your preconceived beliefs. Everything was smooth and rosy in my life at the monastery until I had to come to grips with my own ego issues. They caused turbulence on the flight of my growth. I will discuss this later in the book, but to summarize it briefly now, let me put it this way. Long ago, my path led me to realizations that left my previous beliefs in shambles. I had to clean house, pick up the pieces of old beliefs, review each one of my beliefs individually, and decide whether to trash it, keep it, or fix it. I ended up with a set of beliefs that are far different than those of many people. As you have read, some of my beliefs are regarding Atlantis and the history of our existence. But you may not believe such a place ever existed. So, let's say it didn't. You have already read many things that you may or may not accept or believe. And you're about to read one more. You're about to read more. Just because I believe these things and accept them as truth doesn't make it so. They may be absolutely untrue, or they may not be true to you from your perspective, or they may be absolutely truth. In certain ways, it doesn't really matter, does it? Whatever the case may be, if you don't believe all this intellectual stuff you read in this book, it doesn't matter to us. We know that truth is only half truth at its very best anyway. We love you. I love you. I'd like to live in peace with you and have you love me too, regardless of what we believe or don't believe. As long as we don't hurt each other and we help each other, when in need. Who cares what beliefs we have, religious, political, moral, or whatever? And I believe that's what's most important, because I know that unselfish love is always beneficial. That is one of my revamped beliefs, and I think it's something we should be able to universally agree upon. I can. Can you? Will you? What can it hurt? Nothing. What can help? A great many things, like peace and kindness. So, if you don't believe the idea contained in this book, I hope it will not matter to you that I do, as long as I am loving, kind acting, caring, thinking, harmless person. And similarly, what matters to me about you is not really what you think or believe, what religion you belong to, or if you're an atheist, but how you conduct yourself. What matters to me is whether or not you are loving, kind acting, caring thinking, harmless person. Unfortunately, a person's beliefs do greatly influence how they think and act, though. So while we are on the subject of beliefs and religion, let's take a closer look at the effects of belief. One day I was struggling with my thoughts. I was having doubts because I was having a hard time with my ego. It wasn't the first time, and it wasn't going to be the last time. But as I was sitting in the garden questioning my beliefs and trying to sort some things out, Anastasia came by and told me I should go see Zayn because I seemed upset. I reluctantly acknowledged her advice, slowly got up, and went off to find him. I found him already teaching a group of other novices, but his words were addressing my issues and concerns. I wondered if it was actually all staged for my benefit. It seemed absurd to think that, of course, and self-centered. But as I was never really sure with him what he might do to teach someone something in the best way, here was what I began to listen in on. Regardless of whether or not you believe it, your beliefs control your destiny. So they need to be closely scrutinized for what they create in your life. What you think and believe greatly affects whether or not you are a saint, an evil monster, and everything in between. Like a somewhat kind person or somewhat mean person. I was wondering what the heck he was talking about, because I had just learned that what we believed was irrelevant. So I interrupted the discussion and asked, What does it really matter what beliefs we hold? I thought it didn't matter as long as people are kind, caring, compassionate, and harmless. It is another paradox in a way. It doesn't really matter what beliefs a person has as long as the beliefs they have held. It doesn't really matter what beliefs a person has as long as the beliefs they have yield those virtues of unselfish love you just mentioned. But their beliefs may yield those virtues or yield harm and evil. Beliefs have a dominant and powerful effect on every aspect of our lives. People even kill over beliefs. We'll get into that more in depth later, but I'll continue Zain's lecture for now because you will soon be reading religious concepts that may be in conflict with some of your own. And it may help you to understand better or be more open-minded. Religious beliefs are frequently based on faith, and they most often something we are taught to believe early in life by families' religious beliefs and religion. Other beliefs are absorbed also from our cultures. People don't usually stop and think about the fact that something as seemingly innocuous and insubstantial as our mere beliefs really have much effect on our lives. But they do. In fact, they not only have tremendous effects on our lives, but they also control much of our destiny. How can this be? That just an idea, a belief, controls our destiny? Our beliefs, a belief itself is but an idea. It has no real substance, but we can act based upon our beliefs. The actions we take because of our beliefs have effects, and only the effects, the results of those actions are things we can see, feel, and grasp. This is very important to realize because the effects of our actions, which results from our beliefs, are precisely the things that can be used to determine the value, good or bad, of any given belief. For instance, if you are kind to me because you believe we are all brothers and sisters, your kind actions are something real, something we can both know is good. Kind actions are transcendence of language, culture, and whatever you and I may believe is spiritual truth. Likewise, if you are cruel to me because of a belief, I will know it is a bad belief. There are no obvious examples, of course, and the results of many beliefs may not be so clear-cut. Nevertheless, all beliefs subsequently generate their own thoughts and actions, good or bad. So, what should we believe for the greatest good of ourselves and for the world? Unselfishly loving all beings is a belief of the children of the law of one and the essence of the teachings. Caring about others, compassion and kindness are qualities of unselfish love. If these are things we can all agree are good, then unselfish love can be used as a common or universal measuring stick of goodness. And if unselfish love is the result of true spirituality, these virtues can also be used as the measuring stick of spirituality. Such a measuring stick can be used to compare the manifestations of any belief and thus compare the value of any belief. So we should analyze and compare the effects of our beliefs. Of course, most people don't even think about what they are creating as a result of their beliefs. Do your beliefs further the manifestation of unselfish love or inhibit the manifestation of unselfish love? Do they breed anger, hatred, and harm, or tranquility, love, and healing? Do they make for a better life or a worse life? Do they make for a better world for others or a worse world? People have used their beliefs and been driven by their beliefs to hurt and murder those with different beliefs. It can be over different beliefs about economics, race, religion, you name it. And people will kill over it. What insanity! Why? The teachings make it clear that the primary culprit is our separateness from the universal consciousness and God. And regardless of the teachings, isn't it obvious? Separateness gives most people all over the world the basis for their belief in illustration that we are separate beings and not one being manifesting itself in many forms. This separateness then spawns differences and selfishness. How much harm has been done in the name of God, country, or tribe? How much horror and pain has been inflicted because someone has different racial, national, tribal, class, or religious beliefs? More than we can really grasp with our limited brains. He was through talking for the moment. Zayn was a very intense being. And when he spoke intensely, I almost felt like I was getting punched in the stomach. As he got up and left the room, we all sat silent, moved, shaken up a bit, and remained in deep thought about his words for some while. Any individual who wants to grow, attain enlightenment, or be a really good person must completely reevaluate their beliefs in the light of effects those beliefs have, where they came from, and why. So in the chapter on subconscious programming and beliefs, we will explore the teachings on these subjects in depth. Okay, that's the end of chapter 5. Thank you for sitting in and listening and listening to the Children of the Law of Ones and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. I highly recommend you pick up this book for yourself, read it, reread it, read the information in the back, the meditations, the energy techniques, and so forth. Until then, we will pick up again on chapter 6 next time. So, thank you again for joining me, and love and light to all. And remember, be loving, kind, unselfish. Do all the loving stuff that you know to do that we've read about in the book today.